Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
I'm Ro.
And I'm Lottie, and this week we're discussing everything about The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie.
So this book is basically Song of Achilles meets Small Gods, but it's also Hamlet, is my take.
I mean, my terrible summaries all just featured large rocks yelling. I'm just very about the large... You made the large rock angry and you should all be afraid.
He yells like twice in the entire book.
Yes, but it's very significant.
Impactful.
Yeah,
that's true.
One of my terrible summaries was the incredible rock, you won't like them when they're angry. Although, to be fair, the rock, like as you say, the rock is not always angry.
The rock is angry for a very long time, though.
Revenge is a dish best served cold. And with a side of, patricide or whatever. Actually, it's not patricide, it's his uncle, but still.
Okay, massive spoiler warnings all over the
Oh yeah,
one
spoiler
for this.
warnings all over.
Yes.
I also feel I need to be honest at the start with our dear listeners that, I technically finished this audiobook. Whether I kept track of it is another matter because I struggled with it, and if I didn't have to read it for the podcast, I probably would have DNF'd it, if I'm being brutally honest.
So that's really interesting to me because this is Ann Leckie's, this is one of her more recent books. Her first big book was Ancillary Justice, which multiple people on this podcast had raved at me about, and I struggled my way through on the promise that it would get better, and it did get better. And I can kind of see the good novel in there, and I just couldn't get into it personally. But I love this book. So, yeah.
So I felt that about this book. I think the audiobook narrator was brilliant. I thought her tone of voice and delivery was great because I really loved the chapters I got into were the ones where it was in first person. And then when it flipped to second person, in my head, I could hear myself in my head going, you to they, or the third person. The you really took me out of the sort of immersiveness of the book. So I
can
might
see that happening in audio more than in written word.
Yeah, that's
what
I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe I can have a go at reading it, and I might be able to get into it because I definitely. When I was sort of basically listening to it to go to sleep to, there were bits like, oh, this sounds really interesting. But then when it flips to you, and I was like, I can't.
So yeah, because you mentioned this in the chat we have. So I did go and I listened to an extract of the audiobook, and it didn't bother me still. But then I remembered this isn't the first book I've listened to that was in second person. So I listened to How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia, which is all in second person. And I remember there being an adjustment period when I started listening to that, and then I kind of got used to it.
Yeah, I think this is the only book I've read. I was trying to think actually the other day, and I think it's the only book I've ever read that's in second person. I've read first person and obviously third person.
I was trying to track this back for me because to me second person is no big thing. I write in it all the time, and I'm trying to work out where I first. Because, so the first thing I remember reading that I remember going, oh man, second person, this is really doing something, is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. And in there, the choice of second person, so there's a second person section, there's a first person section and a third person section, I think. And not to spoil, but you eventually find out that it's all the same narrator at different points in their personal timeline. But it's done really, really well. And so for me, it's I get more thrown out by first person.
I'm just thinking the other thing with second person is it's not unusual in video games, and obviously you do have some more control, but in a lot of narrative video games you don't have that much control. You're still kind of embodying a different person to yourself in a way. So I don't know if it was that also made it feel a bit more familiar.
You know what else I was thinking about is This Is a Story About You. Because that was one of the Welcome to Night Vale episodes that really blew me away on a first listen. I re-listened to that so many times. It's such good writing. But that is a very much, because, this is, you've always wanted to hear yourself, a story about yourself on the radio, and that keeps coming back. And it's, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, maybe I have to give it a go, reading it, because I could definitely feel there was a really good book there. And I really loved like I say, when I read the plot summary, because I was a bit lost, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm just need to
that's
see
fair.
the plot summary. And I thought, blimey, I loved the I thought it was a really, really interesting god mechanic structure. And really, really interesting principle behind like the use of the first and the second person as well. I thought it was a really clever like literary tool. Just for me with the audiobook, it was a no.
Because the whole thing about the second person segment is the first person sections start, it's the same narrator the entire way through, and partly they are describing stuff that is literally happening to them, and that spans an enormous range of time because, spoiler alert, the narrator is an ancient god inhabiting a big rock. And then the second person, the person that the rock is speaking to, is a human with a human lifespan. And so part of the book is about understanding how that first person narrator comes to be viewing the second person, like the character, the sort of main character that's a human.
Why? Like, how did they get into the position to be talking to them in the first place?
Yeah, like, how is this narrator even, from what position and what perspective is this narrator even addressing Eolo, the human guy?
And I really liked, it was something that I enjoyed, I think, on the first reread, but particularly on the second one, I was trying a lot harder to kind of follow what was going on, maybe. But I really liked the way that plays with the, I found that the jumping backwards and forwards between, so in the first person, you're getting Strength and Patience of the Hills, our narrator talking about how they came to like know what they were and what the world around them was and how
sort
things
of consciousness.
work.
Spoilers, they're a rock, just to be as clear as possible.
The best rock, my favourite rock in all the world. And then they would work something out, and then you would jump into the second person kind of current narration, and you would be able to see how they were able to do whatever it is they're currently doing, or why they'd be interested in what they're interested in. And how, you know, the what they've just discovered about godhood or about their relationship to people or whatever will be mirrored in whatever's happening in the you sections, which I really
day
liked.
Kind of narrative.
Yeah, which made it a lot easier to keep track of how everything worked from my perspective.
I think that's like a re-listen and reread thing, though, because the first time it's so hard to see how everything interlinks, and it's I think particularly the first time you're reading it, it's two different books jammed together, and then
you realise how they've interwoven.
The reason it's good is because they're so interconnected, but there's kind of a revelation at the end and a really good experience rereading. It's not necessarily so obvious and clear, I think, on the first reading, which I think might be what Lottie was struggling with, of like, oh, the god stuff's really interesting, but this weird politics, like we're redoing Hamlet but slightly different.
I mean, I couldn't put it down, and I can't wait to reread it. I haven't had a chance yet, but one bit I did go back and reread. So one of the big things that changes the way that you will sort of look at the modern day narrative in this book is the fact that there's people all worship this god called the Raven, for whom the Raven Tower is named, and it turns out that the Raven has been either dead or sort of out of the picture for actually all of the modern narrative. And the god who is actually answering all questions that have been directed at the Raven is in fact our narrator. And that completely changes the context of some of the things that the god says, because it's a different person saying it.
It was so tasty on a reread.
Yeah, I went back and looked at some of the things that were like confusing, because it's like you don't, and to see if that knowledge helps interpret some of those scenes a little bit differently. And I actually couldn't. There was one bit that Em and I were discussing where the god gives a really confusing answer, because it's like the communication via these like tablets with symbols on them. Yeah. And even knowing that it was Strength and Patience of the Hills giving that message didn't help me understand what it was.
I think that was supposed to illustrate, because another theme is that Strength and Patience of the Hills is worshipped and by many people, and I think there's a really interesting bit where one of their priests comes and she's like, why can't you tell me the future? And Strength and Patience of the Hills is like, I've never told anyone the future, why do you think I could do that? And she's like, but you have, we all know you have, like sometimes you give these really cryptic messages and we have to work them out, but you know things. And they're just like, I have no idea, what if you weren't literally standing in front of me and talking, I don't know what you're saying, basically.
I did wonder about that on a reread, actually. I think I was confused the first time, but the second time around, now you're saying it, I'm going, oh yeah, it's not, maybe it is giving a nonsense. They are giving a nonsense response because they don't want to answer the question.
I think it's a nonsense response, or like even just them just not acting on the tokens at all. And it's more supposed to highlight the way that I am going to forget their names, but the Polonius and Claudius stand-ins.
And Hibal, I think?
Hibal and, The way that they will take those nonsense answers and interpret them and use them to further their own goals. I think it's more about the people and how they'll take the nonsense than
also the question
strengthen pages of the hills communicating.
Yeah, the question that they ask that results in that nonsense answer is, what are this particular group of people here doing? And like, it's entirely possible that the strength of patient just doesn't know. It's
also possible that the other god is interfering with the tokens in some way at that point, because like there is the snake god who would very much have a stake in confusing that message. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it's like thinking about it in terms of having just done Hamlet last episode, because obviously the main plot is also the modern day plot is Hamlet. It's, you know, young prince returns to find, or young heir to essentially rulership returns home to find that his father is no longer around and the uncle has claimed the seat, and there's a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels. But there are a lot of differences as well, and one that I really loved is that the Ophelia analogue in this, Tikaz, is she's never mad. She's also always got agency. Like she has somewhere to leave to if she needs to. Because in this one, her father is the Polonius character who's an advisor to the sort of the throne, and in this like Claudius. But her mother is in the picture, or sort of lives elsewhere, and is like basically divorced from her father, and it's like, hey, by the way, Tikaz, if things ever get too garbage in the capital,
they get too rotten in the state of Vastai.
Exactly, you can come and just live with me. Like, don't worry about it. That was nice. Thinking about Ophelia as a character who just doesn't have a way out, and Tikaz has that, which I really love because I think Ophelia deserved better. Yeah. And there's this great bit where she knows that. So instead of Hamlet, the Hamlet guy, Moat, having killed her father, which is what happens in Hamlet, it isn't actually him that does it. It's one of the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern kind of analogues
who are done dirty in this.
They are. In this, they are.
Where are my himbos? Damn it!
In this, they are identical twins, which is considered like unlucky, sort of taboo, and they sort of shouldn't be alive, and everybody hates them for it, and they're full of resentment as a result. But there's this bit where the sort of the second person character Eolo tells her like this is what happened. And she says, oh, well, you know, do you know which one of it was? And he's like, no, I can't tell them apart. And she just goes, I guess I'll have to kill them both then. And it's just I love that. I love that for Ophelia, or like for the Ophelia character, is that she's just like, okay, I guess I'm just going to do murder about it.
Also, to be clear, like both of them are absolute dickheads.
Who deserve it.
Like, this is not like, they were both kind of responsible, they were both would have done it kind of thing. Like, so
I was going to say, it's really interesting talking about the Hamlet parallels and the differences, because one of the things that really struck me on this read, having just read, because I think the first time I read this book I hadn't like experienced Hamlet, or if I had, it was far enough in the past that it wasn't really tracking for me at all, that was what was going on,
like direct comparative kind of thing like we can right now.
And the thing that really struck me was that the presiding emotion is really anger rather than grief. And I think that's really clear I think specifically it struck me initially with Tikaz, but as we've been talking, it's also struck me with Oskel and Oskim, the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern analogues, is the reason that the way in which Ophelia's storyline differs, apart from that she's got an escape, is that she's fucking angry. I think in this book, they interpret the madness of the various characters as being angry. Like, Mawat is very, very angry. He doesn't come across as grief-stricken. He doesn't come across particularly as confused or even vulnerable. He doesn't come across as traumatized to me, necessarily. He's just really, really angry. And for him, that is like, this is kind of it's the fatal flaw in a lot of ways. But for Tikaz, it's the thing that allows her that agency. The fact that she's really angry and she's going to do a fucking murder about it, you know, is like, that's what gives her power in this narrative. But it's also, I think, the main difference between Oskel and Oskim and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. That's true. Because Rosencrantz and Guildenstern don't really have any skin in this game. They're pretty hapless, harmless. You know, they're pawns who aren't really, they don't seem to have a huge emotional investment.
They're not really in it for themselves. They get drawn in, whereas Oskel and Oskim are like, and Okim are like, yeah, we want to get involved because we want to advance ourselves and get one up on people.
They are powered by resentment in a way that they're not in the play, and I think that's really interesting.
I think all but textually Hibal's sons as well, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I think.
Which means they have that, in many ways, they're right to be angry. It's very understandable that they're angry. And it's almost more understandable that they're angry than it is that Mawat is. Or at least it's certainly more sympathetic, even if, anybody who comes after my boy Eolo, you get stabbed. Get stabbed about it.
Well, one of the things about the difference in scenario between Mawat, the Hamlet guy in this, and actual Hamlet is that Mawat was always expecting his father to die at a certain stage, because that's kind of the deal of being the ruler of Vastite and sit in the Raven Tower.
In the Raven's lease, yeah.
And also the to die is like a noble deed as well. Like it's important that his dad has died, and the thing that he's dealing with when he comes back is not so much that his father is gone, but that the story that's been put about is that his father shirked his duties of becoming this human sacrifice to the god and allowing the system to continue, which is just like an enormous stain against his honour, is enormous insult and accusation. And that, I think, is something that would trigger anger rather than grief.
Almost, yeah.
So that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So I that is like one of the big mysteries through this book, and I'm just going to say, like, okay, if you have not read it and you are interested, stop here and go read it, because I'm going to spoil that. Because I read this knowing it was kind of inspired by Hamlet, and one of the thoughts I had...
So you assume that he's dead?
Well, one of the thoughts I had is like, oh, they haven't done the ghost. For quite a lot of this book, I was about halfway through this book, it's like, oh, they haven't done the ghost.
And the ghost is the inciting incident in the play.
It also changes the setup, because Mawat is not being charged by his father with a duty in the same way that Hamlet is.
Yeah.
Mawat is more on his own in that way.
But then they do, because the person who first talks to the ghost at the beginning of Hamlet is it's the guards, but it's the guards, and then it's Horatio. And
who is Eolo?
Eolo goes down into Eolo, can't pronounce things. Goes down into the tower, and he finds here's spoiler, the imprisoned ex-Lys, Mawat's father, who is being kept on the edge of death by his brother.
Except that if he had wanted to kill himself to fulfill the terms of his deal with the god, and not and preserve his honour, Mawat points out that, and is correct later, that there was a way for him to do that, because there was some water nearby that he could have gone and drowned himself in, even hogtied as he was. So then when Mawat finds out that actually his father is alive and can be said to have shirked his duty, he's absolutely just it breaks him.
Yeah.
Furious, goes off the rails.
It's really interesting. It's a really interesting subversion of your expectations, because, if you do come to it knowing Hamlet, you go, well, obviously his father is dead, right? His father's got to be dead. And that kind of, in some ways, it does make sense mechanically from what we know of how the sacrifice is supposed to work, because Hibble should be dead. If Mawat's dad isn't dead,
someone has to be.
Anyone else sitting on the throne of the Raven lease, they couldn't legitimately be the Raven's lease. So,
except that the Raven isn't really around anymore.
Yes, which does mess with all of everybody's assumptions. But yeah, the fact that it's not Hamlet's dad's death that breaks Hamlet, it's the fact that Hamlet's dad isn't dead, that is the thing that really flips him.
He failed to be the person that Mawat thought he was.
Yeah.
And so the father that Mawat has in his head is dead.
Yeah. That side of this plot, the modern story of this plot, is very... it does feel more sort of Hamlet-inspired than, a retelling of Hamlet to me. There are so many... It deals with so many of the same ideas, and it has, almost, I guess, characters that fill the same archetypes. But it's so fundamentally different in quite a few ways. And I think that makes it really interesting. And I do think it's still... I really enjoyed reading it, knowing that it was kind of taking inspiration from Hamlet.
I mean, it reminded me in a lot of ways of very good AU fan fiction.
Yeah,
where the setting is so different, and that you get that kind of feeling you get when you're like, oh, that's how you're choosing to reinterpret canon events. That's so interesting, and it's always more fun when it's different, but it's got a similar emotional heart. I'm never a fan of those AUs where people go, oh, it's the same story, but if so-and-so did X instead of... And then it's exactly beat for beat the same story with the same plot line and everything. And I'm like, then why did you do this? What's the point of it? But with this, it's very, they've reimagined it, they've reworked it. It's, Yeah, particularly to include the god mechanics, which I really
that's
enjoy.
it. It's like a crossover AU fic that's also writing the universe it's crossing over with at the same time.
I really love the god mechanics in this.
It's very fun.
But yeah, I mean, let's talk about the god mechanics.
I think they're so interesting. It's sort of like small gods in that gods sort of subsist on prayer, and, you know, if they don't have any prayers, then they don't have any power.
And yeah, like the notion of small gods as well, specifically that there should be small gods everywhere, and the process by which they become big gods, at least as far as we're told by Strength and Patience, does seem to be very similar in terms of the kind of a shepherd finds his sheep in this particular tree, and he assumes this tree has a spirit and leaves an offering, and then and it builds and it accretes around.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, I do. I mean, not to blaspheme on this podcast, I do like the mechanics. Like, the mechanics here feel slightly more complicated and slightly deeper than those in Pratchett. Because it feels like it goes past that belief thing to, like, there's definitely something else. You get, like, hints of it of, like, there's definitely not as many small gods as there is, I feel like, in the Discworld. Like, it is very much specific objects that, like, I love the training process of the gods.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you also, I mean, gods that didn't come into being because of belief, like Strength and Patience of the Hill, and we find out later Myriad is one of the ancient ones as well, that sort of they sort of exist a priori.
And the ancient ones that, like, the Strength and Patience of the Hills saw fighting, like, back in, like, the old pines, and it's like and it's not entirely clear if Strength and Patience of the Hill is, like, almost the same as them, or if there's some other layer of gods, or, like...
Yeah, I was reading the TV tropes, and it said, it's implied that there were some other sentient sort of inhabitants of Earth before, and those were those gods. Like, those were the gods of those people. But I don't think there's much in the text to sort of say yes or no, one way or the other.
I don't think there's enough to point at that clearly. Like,
as close as I got with any kind of, like... Because I like the fact that it's kind of a mystery, and Strength and Patience doesn't even really know. I think that's part of the appeal. But I will say the fact that Strength and Patience is a big rock... and that they're really interested in, like, the stars and orbits and watching space, and that's really important to them. And the Myriad, who is also, like, younger than Strength and Patience, but still been, like, I think around when the ancient ones are, is part of a meteor.
Younger younger in Earth years, but we don't know how long she was zooming around as a comet.
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
And that's the thing, was zooming around as a comet.
Yeah, and also there's I noticed this time around there's a story that the Myriad tells about from when she was still a comet, that she saw something else hit Earth before she did. And the way in which she tells that to Strength and Patience makes me wonder if she doesn't suspect that meteor was Strength and Patience.
Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering if it was she was seeing the collision that formed our moon.
Oh, interesting.
I would need to go back and reread it more carefully, but that's what it put me in mind of, was like our moon is anomalous on Earth, and it's people think the prevailing theory is because there was Earth, and then something crashed into the Earth, and it became Earth and Moon. Like, most of moon matter used to be Earth matter, because most other, like, it's vanishingly rare that any planet has a moon as big and close as ours.
I think I also jumped to that was Strength and Patience of the Hills arriving, I think, when I read that. But yeah, no, that's one. But the thing is, I do love that there's enough space that it feels a little bit more complex, a little bit more interesting.
Well, you also have the whole they can't lie aspect, the sort of words of power thing, which I think is really, really interesting mechanically. It's like there's a very specific way in which they can exert power, and it comes with very specific rules. Yeah,
well, if they say something, it has to already be true, or they have to have enough power to make it true. And if they don't have enough power to make it true, they will spend all of their power in a constant, almost like a feedback loop, until they're completely drained, trying to make it true. They can't take it back. And
this comes into play right at the end, or at least it's the thing that's been killing the Raven. Because the Raven has previously said, all the gods who supported this other faction that I was at war with must be dead. And Strength and Patience of the Hills is one of those, and the Raven doesn't know that. And so that sort of statement that the Raven made ages ago is continually draining him of power throughout the entire narrative, and that's what kills him in the end. But yeah, I very much enjoyed the contrast between... so one of the sort of defining incidences in Strength and Patience of the Hills' narrative is that somebody kills their priest. At the behest of a god, they assumed. Well, no, it's specifically that a god has made it so that Strength and Patience in the Myriad can't see the attack when it happens. And Strength and Patience says, I think, like, literally that day, which is very hasty,
for strength and patience realized that they do actually care about the people that live next door to them, and like there is actually a reason that nothing bad has ever really happened to them when they've been camping beneath them, and that's like maybe because strength and patience likes them,
sort of been passively protecting them,
and literally finds out that they get killed right then. And the contrast between strength and patience getting mad and being like, the god who did this is dead, and then just blacking out. But like they come back, and then the raven just completely unaware that there's an ancient one sitting in Ardvastia's backyard, just like cheerfully like spinning.
Rotating.
It's just sitting there casually rotating for no apparent reason. It's just like they say, yeah, these gods are dead, and then it just doesn't fucking take.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, I think, because I think from Eolo's perspective, like, the Raven is this really powerful, like, from the way Strength and Patience has been talking about him, that he's not all that. Like, he's not
a bit of an upstart, really.
Yeah, but you also know that, like, from the way Eolo talks about him, and the way that, like, the Silent Forest as well is talked about, they're not trivial gods, right? No. And Strength and Patience is just like, yeah, you'll have to try harder than that, son. Yeah. Like,
the bit when because Strength and Patience of the Hill spends so much time as just a big rock, like literally just a big rock. But I mean, rereading what I did find out is like there's a couple of hints earlier that are like so obvious when you read back, which is like what I think the one in particular is like the Tower of the Raven is made of stone.
Yeah, I spent the first half of this book wondering if the yellow stone that gets mentioned so often in the opening of the modern day narrative stuff was Patience of the Hills, like chopped up.
Yeah, and it turns out it's not quite that, but it's that Strength and Patience to Hills can basically like expand themselves into nearby stone, and the entire city basically is being actively watched over by all times. We're going to need to sort a name for them.
Just Strength and Patience. I
Strength and Patience, which like makes so much sense because they've been narrating everything that happens the whole time. How did they know what was happening? And it's because they are everywhere. Anywhere there's like a single pebble in that city, Strength and Patience is.
And the things that they don't know and therefore can't say with certainty because it would cost them power to make it so or whatever, are things like, what was this person thinking at this time?
Yes.
So you get in the narration things like, surely it must have occurred to you then that this, that, the other, or something, or what was going through your head when you thought this, or whatever, which I really like as a sort of, because I kind of sometimes like I try not to sort of say things sometimes that I'm like, I don't know are definitely true. It obviously depends on the context, but I recognize that as a way of like hedging my language.
I was just going to say I really like the repeated beat of "Here is a story I have heard."
Yes.
As a story opening, because they're always quite fairy tale stories, and they're usually about gods, and they revealing something about the limits of speaking as a god, or the ways in which gods move and grow and things. But it's got a resonance. It develops a resonance over the course of the Here is the story I have
American
heard.
Gods a little bit, and the sort of allegorical, or not allegorical, but like parable type stories that you get in that. But the thing that I was thinking of sort of early on while I was reading this is that, as we said, like Strength and Patience is very sort of, will sit and think about things for a long time before acting, and spends a lot of time just being a rock and like not committing himself to any course of action, and not really like taking part in the world around him, like an ent. And thinking about that compared to OG Hamlet as sort of having like who just wants to sort of like sit and consider a course of action and doesn't actually want to do anything, and sort of puts off acting. But when Patience does actually act and sort of goes, okay, I'm going to kill this god because they killed my priest, it doesn't actually go horribly wrong. And in the end, Strength and Patience does win, or at least the ending that we get is Strength and Patience about to get revenge and hoping that all of the people that it likes are going to make it out safely.
Yeah, I mean, I very much enjoy the fact that it doesn't. They don't make the same mistake twice, because when they say that god is dead, like, it's very relatable, and it is like a very like, it's a big badass moment, and you're like, holy shit, did they really? And then they come back, and the Myriad's like, if you hadn't f***ing done that, you and I I had to fend off that raiding party by myself because I knew how much you loved these people, and if you hadn't been hasty, if you hadn't gone mad, there would have been we could have gotten
Easier
a better
way.
outcome.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to our current Hamlet-esque timeline where strength and patience is like, I will wait multiple generations of your family, like spinning at the bottom of this tower, stewing. And only when I am absolutely 100% ready will I fuck up all your shit.
Yeah.
It's just like, I like that. That was good. That's a good. There's something very pleasing about like the contrast between. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like how much I love strength and patience. Right, everything about their narration, I'm just like particularly in the sort of, I guess the past narrative that we're getting. I adore them. They have done nothing wrong ever in their life, and I love them. But in the you narrative, in Eolo's time,
yes,
they are so fucking creepy. They're ominous. Yeah. Like, particularly on a reread, I really enjoyed that there's a bit where Eolo's been in the tower and they've kind of gotten a read on what's going on. And I think it's the first time they go out into the city and they're going to the guest house. Strength and Patience is going, hey, you're smart. You're a smart lad. You notice things. Tell me, Eolo, did you notice that, like, when you walked from one district to another, the horrible smells of, like, the tannery or whatever didn't follow you? Do you notice how, like, people aren't being that safe about fires and yet nothing's caught fire? Have you noticed how, like, well paved and drained the city is? Have you ever wondered what might be doing that? And the implicit threat in that on a reread is delicious. Because
it happens later, right?
Yeah.
Is that once the Raven is sort of properly dead, or like once the thing that is imprisoning Strength and Patience of the Hill and Vasti is the fact that he's being turned. Because there's a thing he does earlier that sort of like that makes it so that if he's being turned, he's sort of at the mercy of whoever's doing it.
Oh, he has to fulfill their obligations usually.
Yeah, he has to fulfill their petitions. And Moat later goes and breaks the tidal mechanics with all the gears and stuff that's making that turning happen. And so now the Strength and Patience of the Hill is not obligated to do shit, and all of the water supply gets contaminated because he's not making it stay clean anymore.
Yeah, people start dying of dysentery, which hasn't like happened in hundreds of years or whatever.
Yeah, because people have been used to it being just taken care of.
Fires start all over the city, that kind of thing. Like,
yeah. And it's really interesting. One of the things that I kind of enjoyed about it, and I think it's one of the most interesting aspects about this from a world building a non-god mechanic perspective, is how interested the book is, and by extension how interested Strength and Patience kind of is, in how things work in a very kind of macro sense, in the kind of like, how do you go from hunter-gatherer tribes who communicate with gods in this way and meet up to do justice and commerce and whatever in this way, and how do you get from them to something like Ardvastia? What's required?
How do you get from that to like empire?
Geographically, like what are the pressures that go into that? What are the needs? What's the give and take? And some of that's done via the god mechanic, so it's sort of talking about alliances between gods and, you know, the drowned one sending them driftwood and in return they get X, you know, all of that sort of thing. But that is eventually what, even without all of the sort of Raven's lease politics, even without what's happening at the top of the tower, like, that's the stuff that gets Vasti in the end. It's not that, you know, Strength and Patience goes like big mad and starts ripping up, although I think they pretty much do that.
It makes me think of the ending of Cabin in the Woods, where there's just like a massive, the old gods get released and are very, very angry, and a massive hand just comes out of the ground and forms a fist. And,
But like they were anyway. Because we know that they don't grow anything. We know that they destroyed Ardvastia. We know that they, that they can't support themselves, that they don't know how. And we've already seen in the historical narrative, like when, it's like the driftwood stops coming and then the trade dries up because of the war with Ardvastia. And Strength and Patience is like, well, they got fine without like needles and ironwork and shit before. They'll be fine again. And the Myriad's like, but they've forgotten how to do all that stuff. Like, it's going to be really hard for them now to relearn that. They don't know. And then that comes back.
Yep.
Because they don't know how to keep water clean by themselves. And they don't know how to stop fires from spreading. Yeah, I enjoyed that immensely. It's very satisfying.
I think that is the thing. I mean, also on like the micro level of what gods say must be true. And I think it's there's kind of I think the first time you introduced to it really is like there's a god in a city where there are lots of gods, and strength and patience is like, what the hell, are lots of gods somewhere? Like someone can sustain more than one god, and there's one god in particular that's like looking at how to like expand the harbor, and like the first and it's that kind of thing of like, well, obviously if you were trying to push back all of the water, that would require so much power. So what you do is you, as a god, you sit and you think, and you like, you know, you physics and sort of logic and rules lawyer your way around the situation.
Yeah,
to be like, okay, if I can get this help from the humans and I can use this power in these specific ways, I can like get the
if I
most
get the
efficiency.
words exactly right.
Yeah, the most efficient use of god power is to do things that are sort of like that the humans can't do for themselves, but will unlock other stuff for them.
Yeah.
There's this one bit where Strength and Patience realizes that the sort of power that it takes to speak something into existence is about equivalent to the effort it would have taken to get it done by a mundane means. And it put me in mind of the magic system in Iraden, where it's like it's sort of the equivalent energy to create something, or and how you could just completely break the economy by using that to create lots of lace, which is incredibly difficult to do mechanically, but is not actually sort of very energy intensive, just skill and effort intensive. But I love that kind of world building where cleverness will actually matter, and thinking very hard about a problem, like the way that when Patience is making food and going, okay, well, we need to do this very specific kind of chemistry, and what's the most efficient way we can do this, and be precise about it.
And that is also how like they got in the end, isn't it? Because they come up with the system. They're like, okay, as long as somebody is causing me to be turned, they can use my power to fulfill their obligations until I stop turning. That's not the exact wording, and the exact wording is important. But the reason that they put it that way is because they've got attendants that turn them, and they can also stop themselves from turning. They're like powerful enough as a god that they can just refuse to move. And it doesn't occur to them that like
that won't always be
you know, somebody could build a mechanism that would do it automatically and they wouldn't be able to get out.
Yeah.
And that's they're essentially out-scienced.
Yes. Or out-rules lawyered almost.
Which is it's they're defeated by a mechanism.
Yeah, hoist by their own petard a little bit. What happens is it's the Raven that's done that, and because the Raven has said that Patience must be dead because they were one of the gods that supported Ardvastia that the Raven was warring against, and Strength and Patience isn't dead, and the Raven's power is constantly being drawn away to try and make that so. Keeping Strength and Patience alive.
And like also turning Strength and Patience is also giving them power. Like that's why they asked to be turned in the first place.
Why that is.
So basically, I think it's because so a key bit of this, if you haven't read the book, is that there are things called God talked or God spoken objects, which
God spoken objects,
which basically like your basic ass magic weapons, basically, you know, like they're magic objects. And Strength and Patience of the Hills, when they speak themselves this turning thing, they are kind of in effect both a god and a god spoken object. And the Raven, when they capture Strength and Patience, thinks they are a god spoken object but does not know they are a god.
Well, the thing that I'm confused about...
Oh yeah, and it's not so much that, is that why does the spinning help them make power, I think is the...
Yeah, because they were spinning before that. That's why the spinning god spoken bit came from. They're like sort of while Strength and Patience is trying to make food, they go... What would happen? Like, would it help me to be turning constantly? And I'm not sure why they thought that and whether or not it was true.
See, I'm thinking it's about orbits. It's about the sun and it's about orbits. And I think because when they're sorting that, they're thinking about like the sun and about how they like to watch the stars move and how that always seems to be circular and how the seasons are cyclical. And I think so. I think at that point they're talking specifically about what makes plants grow.
Yeah, I feel like there's something there I'm supposed to get that I don't.
Yeah. No, and I feel, honestly, I feel the same about that bit. I mean, the link I have is very tenuous in terms of like...
that's as far as I got with it. Yeah.
My thought is just that, like, maybe it's something about... Because we said earlier that the gods are powered by belief. It doesn't seem to exactly be like it's more the gods are powered by...
sort of mechanical acts of belief.
Tribute and stuff. And I wonder if there's something about the literal turning that is like almost maybe like a pure energy tribute that can therefore be really effectively turned into whatever they need. But I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, I wonder if it only works because strength and patience is an old one and is maybe possibly what used to be a meteor. That there's something about circles that's just very good for them personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I always read that it's not that the Raven's drawing power from strength and patience, it's that the Raven is using strength and patience to do all of the things they would otherwise have been doing.
Yes, and that's what allows strength and patience to say, like with their whole chest, later on in the book, I am the god of Vastai and the sustainer of Iraden.
Yes.
Because they have actually been doing
true,
those things rather than their power having been taken from them to do those things.
Yes.
Which is very useful at certain points because it convinces certain characters that strength and patience is actually the Raven.
Yes.
No. I was going to say, thinking about the god mechanics and speaking and how strength and patience stuff is different, because it does seem like they do just have to will stuff.
Yes.
Well, I wonder if that's an ancient gods thing.
Yeah. Because
they just wanted to be near the stars, and so they were never buried under ice.
Yeah.
Even before they had language.
And they wanted the people beneath them to be okay, even before they noticed that they did. Which, can I say, is just very relatable from just as a person. That is very much how I'm like, I don't notice this until, a cloud of mosquitoes lands on my head and tells me that, oh, maybe this is happening because X, Y, Z. Maybe you feel this way because of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, really?
But sort of patience was manipulating the world around them before they had worshippers.
Yeah.
Is my point. And I think that's an ancient ones thing. That there just is some sort of innate power that they have.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if ancient ones are, almost just literally just ancient ones. Like, I wonder if, like, say, the Earth gets exploded tomorrow, all of the gods get sent off into space, and then eventually they hit somewhere else, and it's just, like, second generation godhood, almost. Like,
that's interesting.
I mean,
weirdly, the thing that it reminded me of most, and this is a fairly niche reference, maybe? Ro, you were into Gunnerkrigg, right?
No, I have no idea what that noise is you just made.
Okay.
I recognise the name, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's a webcomic. So Gunnerkrigg Court is one of the, like, older webcomics now. It's, like, of a sort of an era with things like XKCD and Girls with Slingshots and stuff. It's still going. It's very good. But there is a character, so they have a kind of a similar thing that, like, things are powered by belief, or, like, powered by story, like the ether, which is kind of their sort of magic system is kind of, things are possible because humans tell stories about them. Like, Coyote exists and is a character that is very, very powerful trickster because people have told stories about him. And it's
sort of like Tulpa and
Tivian.
I have just Googled this. It started in 2005. It updated 2 days ago.
I'm really behind, but it's been going a really long time, and it's kind of like they've established that, like, that magic works because of stories. Like, it's about the stories that humans tell and the things that humans believe shape what magical creatures exist and what they can do. And then we get a story about this character that was one of my favourites called Jones, who it turns out has been around since, like, the Earth was magma. And that doesn't work because she can't have been, because because there's nobody to tell a story about an immortal woman who's like impervious to all forms of harm and has just been walking the planet since there was magma. Well,
somebody had to be the first, right? Somebody had to be the first person.
But yeah, I tell you what, it was the thing I never got in Gunnerkrigg, actually, was the, like, why, well, it doesn't really explain why she exists. Like, Coyote's like, this is proof that my whole thing about how I only exist because humans said I do thing. It's like, it's supposed to prove a point about the fact that about how the stories work, but she's the exception that very much does not prove the rule, and I'm very confused by it. But that is kind of what it reminded me of, this thing that's been around since before people were around to speak it into existence, and how does that even really work? But I was going to say, this is one of the things I think that second person is doing in this book, because strength and patience can't lie. And by the time we know how powerful they are, it's perfectly possible
they've been manipulating the story the whole time.
That, like, actually it didn't happen this way. But strength and patience is powerful enough to tell the story, and now it's always happened that way.
I really like the horror implications of the sort of reality-altering stuff. And, like, how much power do they have? If I were standing in front of strength and patience right now, and they said to me, you are thinking of pink elephants, right? Or 5 minutes ago, you were thinking of pink elephants. Is that one of the things that's impossible to change and would just, like, kill them?
I had always assumed that they can't do the past. I'd assumed that they couldn't change the past, that they could affect and go forwards. That's what I'd assumed was built into the rules, although I don't think it's ever really stated anywhere.
Because it would be very interesting if they weren't an ancient one until they said they were. Like, if they weren't actually around to see the ancient ones fight, and they weren't actually around for the myriad arriving. Or, hey, maybe there weren't ancient ones until Strength and Patience said there were. You know, you could get really meta with this.
Yeah.
I think you could. I think my default reading is that they can't. If a god tried to say something about the past that was a lie, they would just poof.
They just cease to be.
That is. I don't know though, because like you're working on a thing of like if you're powerful enough though. You're powerful enough,
and we know that Strength and Patience doesn't have to say anything to make these things happen. Strength and Patience doesn't even have to be conscious that they're doing it.
Yes.
Which I don't necessarily think this is what happened, but I think it adds a certain spice.
I think it's very. I think it's very like it definitely like rings very true to me that Strength and Patience is manipulating the story the whole time. Like I could imagine like as things are happening, them
them constantly going to Eolo like, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I really love. I don't know why, it's very creepy to me in a way that I enjoy.
And it's also because literally he could hear them. He gets into the tower and he hears them moving.
Well, there's this bit where Strength and Patience is like, why, I don't know why I've taken such an interest in you. And I was sitting there going, it's because you're the same. You're both like this analytical, like Eolo is very much like, very much in his own head, keeps to himself, thinking about things, thinking about the course of actions, watching, waiting, cogitating.
Yeah. And like, but also like, I will get mad and I will stand up for myself. Which was something I was going to say back again about sort of Eolo versus Horatio, is that he's got the same kind of makeover that the other characters have in terms of, I feel like Horatio in the play is relatively passive.
He's a bit of a pushover,
And the thing about Eolo is while he does let Mawat get away with a lot of shit,
it's a very conscious decision to do that.
Yeah, and he's also like very much not okay with letting other people push him around, and he's very good at making sure that they don't.
His introductory character moment, right, is he is coming back with Mawat from where they've been fighting in the south doing border patrol stuff.
Yeah.
And Mawat is saying like, oh well, when I have all of the power of this god at my fingertips, because that's what he thinks is about to happen, I can do whatever I want. I could give you magical sex change because Eolo is trans mask of. We don't really get much of him talking about his gender other than people refer to him with he pronouns, and he says he's not a woman. And Eolo's just like, I don't like it. Doesn't sort of. It stands up for himself in the sense that like he doesn't know if he wants that, and it's really kind of weird and creepy of Mawat to sort of press on it as a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
And to assume that that's something he'd be interested in, or that that it would somehow make something real when it wasn't before.
Yeah, and in that same scene, it's very clear that Mawat is of a higher station than Eolo, and the fact that Eolo is still standing up for himself in the situation is like that's an establishing character.
Which does I feel like they do make quite a few changes. Like from Horatio, like Eolo is definitely lower in status. Like I think he's what the child of a prosperous farmer and has obviously run away to join the army, like not a fellow student. Admittedly, like Horatio is definitely of lower status, but I think they do, like he does change Horatio maybe like the most of kind of the characters, although it's still kind of recognisably the same thing, and definitely the kind of devotion to Hamlet or Mawat. And I do think sometimes like he stands up for himself in ways that like I think if Horatio was pushed, like particularly standing up to Hamlet, he would have done in terms of like, I will speak truth to you. And there's that element in the relationship between Hamlet and Horatio, I think, that is there but never really forced to the edge. But with Mawat and Eolo, it is. Like there's a moment where Eolo says, I will tell you the truth, or even if you will kill me for it, kind of thing. And I will keep saying
And Mawat
this.
very nearly does.
Yes.
And also that as a like,
anger
I'm not,
issues.
I can't lie to you. That's a God thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to tell the truth.
I also enjoyed the switch of Horatio. It's implied by the end of the play that Horatio is the one that's going to tell the story. Horatio is the silent. It was the witness that has been there the whole time and is the only person who can speak to, who's left alive to speak. I alone am escaped to tell thee. But Eolo is the one that is the story is being told to. Which is quite an interesting shift, I think.
But I think it also, like, it's that kind of echo of Horatio being the witness that kind of, I think, makes the link between strength and patience.
Yeah,
and,
he's the only one. He's the one with all the information. And actually, I think that's why the final confrontation falls apart so quickly as it does. Why? Because I think at some level, Eolo was hearing everything that strength and patience said, right? Because I think he's a lot quicker off the mark in that final confrontation
to realise that the Raven is not around, and
than I think he would necessarily have been if he didn't already kind of know. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it ties into the Eolo stuff, but also the second person, is gender. Before we get into the fun stuff, I want to talk gender real quick. Let's talk gender, everybody. This is our first trans protagonist, everybody. How do we feel?
I really liked it.
I liked him. I feel like there was... Well, it's difficult, right? Because it's not a book that's... It's a book that I think very nicely kind of goes, this character is trans, that's not particularly important, let's move on. Like, you know, it's
there's some fun stuff with him and Tikaz, where they're sort of flirting with each other / sort of like figuring out who each other are as people. Like, she asked him, because there's a bit he gets injured and she's looking after him, and she goes, oh, are you one of those women who bind their chest so that they can fight, or are you really not a woman? Like, off the bat, she's going, is that an option? Like, that she doesn't make the assumption that it's the former case.
Yes.
And I really liked that. And then it's like, oh, she had a trans aunt.
Yeah, I think there's a nice, like, just level of trans awareness in the setting that's built up, and there's kind of signals used to sort of make it pretty clear to a modern audience this character's trans, and...
Well, there's one bit where Eolo goes to the Gertrude analogue, who is much more sympathetic, I think, in this than in the original Hamlet.
Definitely,
and he goes, "Oh, I thought I heard you had a daughter." And she goes, "A son. He lives in Ardvastia, which we know to be far more accepting of things like twins and trans people." And I'm just like, is that she has a trans son? Because, you know, Eolo heard it was a daughter.
Oh, I didn't pick that up on that. Yeah.
No, I think it's conjecture on my part, but it could be intentional on the part of Ann Leckie. Yeah. Which I really loved. I was just like, yes, trans person count in this story 3.
Yeah, I think it's nice. I think it's pretty well done. I think there's a slight element of Elo's character that kind of reads as, oh, this is being ridden by a pretty, like, as far as we're aware, like, entirely cis person, and that kind of. I guess what I'm trying to express is, like, sometimes you read things and there are bits of just like, oh yes, this person has had this lived experience that is very close to mine, and there are small details and kind of elements of that feel very true, and I feel like I didn't get that massively with Eolo. Like, it was very like the overall, like, nothing's wrong. Like, this is really like good portrayal. Like, I had nothing bad to say about it apart from like, well, not even apart from like it was just kind of missing that kind of very close spark of recognition. I don't know if that's because obviously, like, there's a lot of ways to be trans, and it might just be that Ann Leckie is portraying, like, it might be that this character does vibe in that, like, really specific way with other trans mass people, and it's just not with me, or it could be that kind of missing thing of, like, just not having that lived experience, not being able to put that extra, like, shine of detail on there, which is entirely understandable, not something that I would actually expect of an author.
Well, I was going to say, particularly not of a book that's not fundamentally about Eolo being trans. Like, this is
you don't really get that level of detail about anything else about him.
I was going to say, I did kind of appreciate him as kind of the fact that we're introduced to the fact that he's trans by him going, actually, I don't want the magical equivalent of any kind of gender affirming surgery. I'm not. That's not where I want to go with this, because I feel like, I mean, this is not a
just
complaint. I'm not going to be like, oh man, I want the we any representation that we get is like, and we're not a monolith and all of this. But I do quite like the fact, I feel like I don't see as much of the I don't need or not.
I'm going to define myself on my terms and not what other people
think
I
there's
ought to want.
Just like trans people who don't want or need surgery.
Yeah.
Or any kind of like medically aided transition, because that's never been something that I've really been all that interested in, and it's not something that I see very often being represented. That it's just like, I don't know, the body stuff just doesn't.
That isn't where that's not the site of interest,
you know. Yeah,
in terms of like what gender does in your life.
Which obviously, like, my experience of that is very different because I think I quite like that. I kind of wish like a tiny bit more detail had been put into that. I also think like a lot of the stuff about like repeated references to binding and stuff were, I think she was probably slightly handicapped by needing to signal that this character is trans in a way that makes sense to a wide audience. And I think maybe the bits that I were like, oh, that feels a bit almost basic, and like you're just kind of going like, this is a trans character, just colour this in, make it really clear.
Sort of like Mulan level of this is what pretending to be a boy looks like, quote unquote.
Yes, and I think that probably is more about just having to be clear for a wide audience.
For sure.
But like I say, I actually a great just like you could hold this up as an example of like when people are like, oh no, but you shouldn't write about characters that don't have your experience. It's like, no, this is a book that absolutely should exist, and I'm glad exists as like a trans character. It's
and like that again, that the conversation that he has with Tikaz when she's looking after him, it's like, that was so refreshing that it was not, I was expecting there to be a whole like, oh, I found out your secret, and actually she's just like, oh, so you know what is your deal? How you know?
And it's very much the question that is being asked in the sense of, how can I best continue to relate to you and refer to you in the way that you want? Like, what do I need to do for you in this circumstance for you to be comfortable? Rather than sort of question, rather than a sort of prurient interest in the mechanics or anything.
Yeah, she's not being nosy. I think she'd take her fuck off. You don't get to know that in that moment.
The other gender thing I wanted to talk about. This is really. It's actually more relevant to the audiobook stuff, so I don't know if Lottie came back, if she wants to chime in on this.
I am floating in the background. I just wanted to let you guys talk because it's really interesting. And I think actually, to be honest, listening to you guys talk about the book makes it make a heck of a lot more sense.
We're getting you more excited about it.
You're more likely to give it another go now.
I am more likely to get, now I have a bit more context.
If you want physical paper copy, we have 2 in this household.
Yeah,
now,
I'm also holding one in my hands right now, so we have many copies. We can get one to you.
I can come
the reason I wanted to bring this back in is because we haven't talked about gender with gods, and the fact that the book is in second person means we don't actually know how strength and patience identifies in that regard, because gods do have gender. The myriad is always she, and the horrible dog that we hate is always he. And the raven's always
forest
he.
is she.
And the interesting thing is, so when I spoke to a friend of ours about this when she listened to the audiobook too, I was referring to strength and patience with he pronouns initially. I hadn't thought about it, which is, you know...
but if the narrator of an audiobook has a voice that you class as feminine...
the narrator's a woman, so she was referring to them by she pronouns, and I thought that was really interesting that you kind of, you don't know. That's very tasty to me. That's not saying anything about me that I like to write in second person where you can't tell what anybody's gender's like. Yeah. I'm not projecting anything there. There's nothing to see here. Absolutely
I'm
nothing.
definitely not projecting by going, they are a rock. Just them. just little rock guy.
The little rock guy who
they
doesn't
are a little rock guy. There you go.
Messy meet people emotions or romance or anything.
I've sprinkled a few he's in there, but honestly I feel like that's just kind of balanced because the myriad is she. So I'm just going...
Okay.
There's fewer male gods around, but that's again is not actually true because there's the raven and there's the horrible medicine dog.
Is the raven?
I think the raven is he. Yeah, okay. But I don't think we ever find out what the silent forest is. I think the silent forest is always
I think.
Silent.
Okay. I think yes, she feels kind of right. I think because so much of the priest, like it's a priestesshood basically of the silent forest.
Other gods refer to the silent forest as she.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, that's an interesting thing I like. It's something I like about second person is that you can't necessarily, and it's interesting to, why did I default to he when I didn't have that information or the audiobook presenter telling, that's,
And also given that this is what we see of strength and patience's like internal world and like his sort of stream of consciousness, there isn't anything in there to suggest gender, right? Necessarily. No. So, it's an interesting statement that the myriad does have that.
Yeah.
And I also think they're kind of interesting in that I'm going to relate that back to what I was saying about Eolo previously and them not wanting god-assisted medical transition.
I'm already who I am. You know,
like the fact
medical
that,
transition, magical transition. I
yeah. Yeah. I guess physical maybe is maybe
physical. That's
more
probably
the
word
word I'm
the
looking
more
for.
useful term.
Yeah. But the fact that the myriad multiple times tries to get strength and patience to try out a human body or a tree body or a
just anything that's not that rock.
And strength and patience is like, no, I like being a rock. Piss off.
Yes, gender is rock.
I'm just like,
no,
very relatable. Do you like that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
we are
have
really
to move
running
on
over
to
time. Yeah.
Yes, Rohu edits these and wants to try and keep it to a reasonable length of time.
I'm just looking at those seconds tick up and listening to every swear word that comes out of Em's mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump in and be like, guys, you need to do fun questions.
Okay. Which bits do we want to go? Which ones do we
I
think
want to
are
know
fun for
which
this?
god is mansplain, manipulate, or male wife.
Which god?
Yeah.
I didn't read enough of the bits with all the gods. I mean, strength and patience has to be manipulate, right? Like a really like.
I think I was going to put forward the medicine dog as because he like literally not only allows but encourages some of the people in his care to become incredibly sick with malnutrition for science.
Yes.
Like he's mad scientist.
And he's very much like he is very much keeping that information from strength and patience because he knows that strength and patience won't be happy about it, and B, he's rightfully quite scared of strength and patience.
Yep.
Yeah. See, I feel like my vote for strength and patience is because strength and patience is turning like who can turn me plan ends up kind of winning out over the kind of the push to become to be brought into the larger manipulations, and then it kind of almost loses to the Raven, but then interesting thing now it not they other valid set of pronouns, Murderbot Diaries, anyway but then strength and patience still manages to manipulate their way out of the Raven situation as well. So
who is male wife though?
Oh god, male wife.
I mean, I think the tiny evil shrew skull that strength and patience kills is not male wife exactly, but he does support male wives. He's very much he's very much I support gay rights and also gay wrongs.
I think that's as close as we're gonna get.
Yeah. It's not a male wife heavy. No. I guess not many gods have relationships in that way, I guess.
Yeah.
And none of them really embody male wife energy.
No.
This is true. Yeah. Although, I mean, can we get any further with Gaslight, Gatekeep, Girl Boss? I feel like the Myriad could be either the Myriad or the Silent Forest is Girl Boss. I'm putting that out there.
Gaslight, Gatekeep, Girl Boss. Okay, I mean, Gaslight is Raven, right?
Well, I think also the medicine dog again, because there's that whole situation where they're like eating the smaller gods for power, right?
Okay, yeah.
And lying about it to the other gods.
As much as a god can, yeah.
Yeah. Misdirecting.
Okay, maybe Raven's Gatekeep then. Like,
I mean, they do spend an awful lot of time trying to control who gets to go through the strait. I think that's a valid.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. I think that's legit.
I think I'm going to go with Myriad just because, like...
What, for Girl Boss?
Yeah, for Girl Boss.
Yeah.
I think.
It's the Silent Forest. I mean, the Silent Forest does some cool shit.
Girl Boss is a very active... I mean, the Silent Forest has, like, one breakout
badass moment.
But,
Stalker is in contention as well. Stalker is a she, the god that we first see getting a willing human sacrifice.
Strong girl boss energies, yes.
Yes, I'm very much with you
Feral
on that.
girl boss, a little
very
bit.
Much like I will make bargains with you, but I will use them for my own advantage.
Yeah.
Like...
She gets stuff done and she will literally take the blood of her workers.
Do you think she successfully utilised girl boss energy when she did this? That, yeah.
She effectively utilised girl power when she...
Yeah, that's it.
What do you guys think the cat would rate this book?
Ooh.
So there is a cat in it. Very briefly, there's a lynx gets mentioned.
Okay. Oh yes, because that's one of the forms that Stalker takes.
Stalker
right?
really likes. Yes.
Yeah.
There is backstabbing. There is.
There's also a platter of
murder.
milk that's left out for Mala.
Yeah, this is true.
I feel like she would also enjoy knocking like the bags of tokens over. I think the god there's some god behaviour that she's also quite like.
I think she would identify quite strongly with all the gods in this, to be honest.
I'm thinking like a 7 or an 8, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's where I'm
stronger.
Like, there's no dragons, unfortunately.
And I think it's not heavy on shenanigan.
No.
really, is it? Like, a much more sort of cosmic horror, I guess, or god-based supernatural dread, which is not super shenanigan heavy. Yeah, I mean, I'd be leaning towards a 6 or a 7. Yeah, obviously, my rating is off the charts. This is one of my favourite books. I adore it.
No,
but,
I could not put this down.
But I think we probably settled with the 7 for the cat rating. Yeah, and it feels like
that works for me. Lottie, what do you think? Is that preserving the integrity of the cat scale?
Yes, I feel that oh God, I can't say words. Keeps the integrity of the
To be fair, you're out of practice. You've had a whole episode. I was going to say, we might have to cut this bit because we're running out of time, but I do kind of want to hear what else you guys have been reading.
So, I have mostly been trying to read this and absolutely failing, but I've also been like, I blasted through as quickly as I could on my library subscription a manga called Blue Period. Okay. And I just got finally, it took me ages to find the first volume because it's on like volume 10 now. It took me ages to find the first volume in paperback, and I just got that and reread it, and I absolutely love it. It is like anyone who's ever done anything creative, I think should read this manga. It's about a high school student who is like, just like a smart, hardworking kid who does everything he should, and also like goes out and has fun with his friends. Like, it's like ticking all of the boxes, and but it's just a bit like, I'll just do the thing and I'll go to a good university, I'll get the good job, I'll help out my family kind of thing, and then basically just falls in love with art and is like, oh god, I have to get into the most prestigious art school in Japan now because it's the only one that's public, and it's the only one that's like got anything close to reasonable tuition fees, and it's not just that story. So he like later on, but like the first arc is basically like the application for this university arc that does like, it's like about 6 or so volumes. It's really long, but it is great. It's amazing. Just like, it's got a really interesting trans character as well. One of the secondary characters is trans.
Nice.
Which was nice. Really great, interesting cast, and just kind of that really interesting discussion about like creating things and what that means, and like struggling with things where like I started doing this because I love it, but now it's like difficult. I'm like, what does that mean?
Oh boy.
Like, should I still pursue things? And just and like
me stressing about when I wanted to go to music college.
You need you need to read this, and it's really great. And also like all of the artwork in there is done by like lots of people, including just the main artist. So all of the artworks that you see are like credited, and there'll be a little bit at the back thanking everyone, and that's really interesting, particularly for some of the early artwork, which is obviously like early beginners artwork. So it's like high school students, like people who haven't drawn for a long time, like doing a sketch of just like the street as this character like does multiple still lifes over the process of the first couple of volumes to learn how to draw. And it's just like,
that's really cool.
There's just a load of like beautiful artwork in lots of different ways, and it's amazing. So yeah, we're gonna have to keep that because I love it so much.
Excellent.
I haven't been reading. So go on, Lottie.
No, I was going to say I haven't read anything. I've been very lazy this week, so yeah.
I haven't been reading, but I have been playing Dredge, which is it's a fishing game, but it's also Lovecraftian horror. And you go around and you catch creepy fish, and you have to figure out like who you even are and how you relate to all of these weird happenings that you keep learning about. And it's very good. It's got incredible like vibes, and the gameplay loop is really, really tight. The narrative hooks are really, really good. I basically couldn't put it down. It's about like 10-15 hour playthrough, and it's available on all your platforms. This podcast not sponsored by Dredge, but it is really, really good, and I loved it a lot.
I have been, everything has been on fire a little bit in my life, so I have not been reading much apart from The Raven Tower. But I did play. I had a cup of tea earlier, and I played the Choose Your Own Adventure Hamlet again, and this time I got stuck in Macbeth as Banquo, and I'm definitely going to end up dead again. Why can I not play this without ending up dead?
I mean, that might be the Hamlet aspect of it.
I mean, it might be. But I want to get to the pirates. Like, there are pirates. Every time I flick through it, I see cool pirate scenes that I'm not playing, and I'm like, how do I get to the pirates?
They're not actually accessible from the main storyline. They're just there for you to see when you flick through.
I just have to open it in there. I just have to pick a pirate one and go. As I say, the D&D movie we saw yesterday, actually very good.
It's very fun.
Did enjoy that. Yeah.
Yes, I enjoyed that very, very much.
Insufficiently gay, but you can't have everything.
That wraps us up, doesn't it?
Next time, I think it's our mini episode next time, as she rapidly pulls up the
Quick, where's the spreadsheet?
Where's the spreadsheet?
So yeah, we've got a Temeraire mini episode coming up.
Yes, Temeraire mini episode. So yes, very exciting. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a review on your podcast platform. It means the world to us. Or you can email us at teachingmycat2read@gmail.com. If you want to give us a question for the Q&A at the end of the series, you can contact us on all of our socials as well as on our email. We'll pop it on our list of questions to add on. So say hello, send us a message and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time. Bye.